Deus in adiutorium meum intende.
Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. A blessed first Sunday of Lent to all of you. I hope your Lenten observances are going well so far. I just wanted to give a brief reflection on the gospel for this first Sunday of Lent. And every year, from tradition, we hear the gospel of our Lord's temptation in the desert on the first Sunday of Lent. And in the traditional Latin Mass, it's always from the Gospel of Matthew. And in the Novus Ordo, it rotates between St. Matthew, St. Mark, and St. Luke. This year, in the Novus Ordo, we hear from St. Mark's account of our Lord's temptation in the desert. But we whatever year it is, whatever the case might be, from tradition, we always hear our Lord's temptation in the desert on the first Sunday of Lent. And there's one line in particular that I just kind of want to focus on just as a brief reflection. And this is from the Gospel of Matthew. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And that's when Satan, St. Matthew refers to him as the tempter, comes to him. So if you think about it, Jesus fasted in the desert 40 days and 40 nights. And that's one of the reasons why, this gospel is given to us on the first Sunday of Lent, because obviously Lent is a period of 40 days. And so, our Lord's time in the desert is a pattern for our own Lenten observance. But what's interesting was at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And that shouldn't surprise us, obviously. Our Lord in his humanity, having fasted 40 days and 40 nights, of course he was hungry. But what's interesting is that this is when the tempter, Satan, comes to him. And, it reminds us that in our own times of weakness, that can be when we experience temptation, because we are physical and mental and spiritual, right? We have the body and the mind and the soul as well. We're not just, souls trapped in a body, so when we experience it sometimes that, when we are sick, sometimes mentally we're not at our best, and spiritually we're not at our best, and vice versa. So a lot of times in our physical weakness, when we're struggling physically or mentally, that's oftentimes when we are not strong spiritually, and so that's when the devil comes and tempts us. A lot of times we experience temptation in our times of weakness. And for a lot of people, there are a couple of times when they experience temptation, and that is when they are stressed or when they are fatigued, when they are tired. It's oftentimes when we are stressed, we are looking for some way to relieve that stress. And so sometimes the temptation is going to turn to other things, sometimes, unfortunately, sinful things to alleviate that stress. And that's when we fall into sin. Sometimes when we are tired, again, when we are physically tired or even mentally tired, that's oftentimes spiritually when we let our guard down and we can fall victim to temptation during those times of fatigue and tiredness. And so, maybe that's you, maybe you've experienced that as well, because those are two common times, occasions when people can experience temptation. And I say that because, knowing that about ourselves, we should always be aware, when am I tired? When am I stressed? And to know ahead of time that might be a time when I experience temptation, when the devil will come in, because the devil knows our weakness more than we do. And so that might be a time when the devil comes in and tries to tempt us. That instead of turning to God during those times, he's going to tempt us to turn to something that is sinful. And so knowing that ahead of time, we should be on guard. Like when I notice that I'm tired, when I notice that I'm stressed, I should already know in my head that I am susceptible to temptation at this time. And so I need to know ahead of time, when I'm tired, the next time I feel tired or fatigued, what am I going to do about it? Or the next time that I'm stressed, what am I going to do about it? So that I can be on guard, if temptation should come, and hopefully having prayed and thought about the right way to handle those things, I will be able to handle them in the proper way. Of course, Jesus in the desert and in other times gives us the example. We see many times in the gospel Jesus turning to prayer, especially in pivotal moments in his ministry. Think of the agony in the garden. Jesus prays to the Father, right? And so in doing so, he gives us an example as well. So how do we handle times of stress? We turn to prayer. We turn to God and we share with him the things that are making us stressful, making us angry, making us anxious. We turn to prayer and we give those things to the Lord instead of turning to something, some material thing, or worse yet, some sinful thing to alleviate us of our stress. Better, of course, to turn to God. When I am tired, instead of turning to something sinful, better to turn to God, right? And so this is one of the reasons why we are practicing self-denial during Lent. It's not that chocolate, for example, is bad in and of itself, but oftentimes we will turn to it in times of stress instead of turning to God, right? And while chocolate in itself is not a bad thing, it can sometimes be a distraction, a temptation away from the Lord. Instead of turning to God, I would turn to this created thing when I should be turning to God in prayer. So this is one of the reasons why we're practicing these acts of self-denial during Lent, so that we get into the habit of not turning to some created thing, but instead we turn to God in all of our needs. Right? So, and that's the thing. The devil knows our weaknesses. He knows when we are susceptible to temptation, and that's often the times when he will, he knows what buttons to press. And so that oftentimes those will be the times when he does it. So knowing this ahead of time and seeing the example that our Lord gives us, hopefully we will be better equipped in the future to handle those times of temptation. Jesus was tempted, so will we be tempted. Throughout our lifetime, we will always have to face temptations. But if we know how to handle them, if we are aware of our weaknesses, then we'll be better served to stand in the face of temptation and remain faithful to the Lord. So turn to the Lord in all things. Let your acts of self-denial this Lent be a time when you learn or develop the habit of turning to God, so that in the face of temptation, we will always know where to go. God bless you.